Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 32. We made it to 32 episodes this year. This is pretty much the season finale of season 2. I think the show will be back in January. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out and asking questions and helping me figure these things out as we go. The show is getting cut short, or the season is getting cut a little bit short because there's a lot of really important things that I have to work on this month, not least of all being that we are very soon going to be launching the very first plugin from Rocket Lasso. So if you want first word on that, be sure to join the Rocket Lasso newsletter, which has literally never had an issue go out, but you can go ahead and go to rocketlasso.com, and at the bottom you'll see just sign up. It'll never get spammy. It's a lot of effort to put together a newsletter, so it probably won't happen very often. We've already got questions starting to come together here in Twitch and on YouTube. So let me scroll through and see what we've got. Now, let's see. The conversation was split between YouTube and Twitch. You're asking about flocking. I will immediately share my screen so I don't forget. And here is the link. Let's see what we end up with. Make sure that's muted. And we can pull it over here. All right. This is from Vessel Studios. This was posted by Maxon, which presumably means this is the demo reel from someone. Wait. Oh, Vessel Studios. They, I think I watched their presentation. Maybe. Let me see. Is it? Yeah. I was going to say the presentation where there's all 4 people speaking. What's funny is that they talked about how much that they were inspired by my tutorials and by EJ's tutorials. So there's a good chance that there is something that walks through here and would talk about this type of thing already in an EJ type tutorial or mine. Now you're talking about flocking around a spline. The pattern on the tracer that stretches. I think you're just talking about, it's just kind of it's a nice little flocking thing, and they're kind of attracted over to this sphere. Now, they do talk about some of this. I don't know in how much detail. It was a very nice presentation. You should definitely check it out. I'll have a link for that below. But let's just kind of take this as inspiration for doing some general flocking ideas. We did some similar ones, so let's see what we can do, and if we can even push it a little extra further as well. Now, if we're going to have things flock around, there's 2 basic ways of doing it. One would be with particles, and the other would be with dynamics. So why don't we do with dynamics? Because it just makes everything a little bit more interactive. So here we are in S22, creating a cloner, keeping this calculating as quick and efficiently as possible. We will create a sphere, make it a child of the cloner, make it pretty small, 10 for the radius. I could even set it to icosahedron and decrease my poly count to be pretty low. I'm going to go up just one more tick here so you can see that there's a decent number of subdivisions, but it's not too crazy. Right-clicking on the sphere, we have a simulation rigid body tag, and I'm going to immediately make sure that it is calculating the shape as ellipsoid. So it's calculating it as a sphere. It's incredibly accurate and incredibly fast. If you haven't checked out my gear tutorial recently about fast dynamics, you can see how important using dynamic spheres is for just getting a lot more control. All right. Now, there are 2 main thoughts here I have as far as the way they're going to be flocking. One would be them wanting to follow a particular position and drive everything more like a constructed rig. So let me show you what I mean. In fact, we can temporarily steal away this dynamics tag. I'm going to make a null and move the dynamics tag onto that. So it's not going to be calculating, but we can pull it back in easily. And of course, the basic thing here would be, I suppose we should probably draw a spline, shouldn't we? Before we talk about different methods. I'll just use the sketch tool. Well, you know what? It's probably better to draw out the handles just so I have a little bit more direct control over how these are curving. That's fine. We'll just do a big old figure 8. And then I always like drawing a spline in 2 dimensions like that. And then it's really easy to grab this and stretch the handles in 3 dimensions so that they can get a little bit of crossover and move around in those different ways. And you could always select all the points once you move them. Right click and say, where is it? Smooth interpolation. It's going to reinterpret all of them to be a very smooth arc as they travel around. So, that can be handy. All right, so let's say that these are cloning onto that spline. So change the cloner to object. The spline is what we want to clone onto. We can set a direct count, which I think is good for our case right now. I'm going to say 30. And instead of them being along the entire thing, let's limit them to a fairly small space right there. Now you're going to see that there's a lot of interesting clumping here. They're not distributed very evenly. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is the distribution type. If we had set this to step mode, it's going to be creating them every certain step. However, we could leave it on count, and I think this has mostly to do with the spline type. So inside the spline, it's set to an adaptive mode. But if we say, no, you are uniform mode, and we give it whatever number of subdivisions we want, it doesn't have to be too high, you're going to see that they can distribute a lot more evenly because the sub points being generated by a spline are distributed more evenly. So now you can see that that is way cleaner along those lines. So they're being told to just hang out in that range. I'm going to subdivide a few more times. You can see the subdivisions here. They're a little janky, but we can always change it because it's a setting that is able to be adapted at any moment. So what I was going to say is one way of doing this, not really doing as much simulation, would be, let's say these are supposed to travel along that track. Really simple. We can say, give it a rate. And that rate is going to say, they'll all be constantly moving along this track at that set speed. Give ourselves a few extra frames there. They will constantly be traveling around at that speed. We could give it a rate variation, and they'll start slowly going at different speeds as they go. They will separate slowly as they do that. So maybe you want to do that, maybe you don't. And then adding, of course, something like a random effector will spread them out, and they can be traveling along now, but via a random. I'm going to subdivide this even more. Go back to the default 8. We'll probably make it, I'm still surprised. I guess it's uniform, so we can jump this up to something crazy. So now it's significantly subdivided. So you can see that they're traveling along, but you might get something like a pop, like we saw right there. I think it's going to do kind of that gimbal lock flip. So you see right here, they're going to flip over where they're crossing one axis to another. There's probably ways around that, specifically being, let's set this to indexed mode and change the random mode from random to noise based. And instead of it being globally based, I want it based on their individual UVs. So it's essentially they're bringing the noise along with them as a relative scale. There might still be a pop in that center point, so it's something we might need to look into. But now you can see that they're all wiggling around doing their own thing pretty well. Let's add in even a little bit more variation there, the way they can wiggle. Now the speed we set will be relevant, so we can slow that down so they can kind of travel along, do their thing. Of course, we're getting all this motion for free. We haven't keyframed anything. However, they are not, yeah, we do get that flip. Trying to think of how I would get around it. It's probably that they're rotated differently. We'd probably get away from it if we make a rail spline. Let's not worry about that quite yet. But you can see how these are traveling along. Of course, if they collide into each other, or let's say even better, an obstacle. So we'll create a big sphere here for them to collide into. We talked about this topic recently, but we'll go in some different directions. So that's now a collider body. So here's the thought. They're all traveling along that line and randomly moving. If we move the dynamics tag onto there, then we can say we want it to follow the current position with something relative. Well, 5 is kind of the minimum if you want it to counteract gravity, even though they'll all probably sag a little bit. You see they'll travel along that line, but now they are dynamic and they'll bump into each other and not be able to get past. And as they fly around, then you'll see they'll crash in the sphere and travel around it and then continue to that set location. So this is sort of building a set rig where, yes, it's dynamic, but we're controlling everything very kind of mechanically. We're less worried about simulation. Simulation is just kind of this nice layer on the top at the very end of the process. So that is definitely one methodology. I guess we should continue down this one, and then kind of unrelated or separately, we'll talk about doing a, where we go, simulate forces. Later, we'll talk about using field forces a bit. So staying on this slightly more mechanical rig, we can let these travel along. And you were talking about them having those tails and potentially even having a direction. Tails are super simple. We have our cloner, and I could say, you know what? I want a tracer. The tracer is going to trace a path from all of them. And they're actually, it's not, I thought they'd trace their individual points, but it is not, which is nice. Usually you have to turn off trace vertices. I'm not sure why it did or did not do that this time. And it's going to trace a line all the time. We don't want that. So let's just say it's tracing from the end point, and we want to trace for, let's say, 11 frames. So 11 frames worth of tail is all traveling off of those. Now, something that's pretty neat is if we want these to have some sort of orientation. Right now, they're just kind of floating around, and they don't have a direction. So something I like doing to get some sort of direction from here would be let's say we're ignoring those spheres now. We don't need to see them. We're not worried about those. But now we get this really nice tracer object tracing along a path. So if I were to create some shape, I guess we'll just keep it simple. Create a cone shape, reduce the polygons because we don't need too many. And it's pretty big. And we'll make it pointier. Taller. What we can do is create a brand new cloner, put the cone inside of the cloner, and clone onto an object, that object being the tracer. And just to help with a little bit of an order of operations, we can move that after. So it's like first these dynamics happen, then the tracer happens, then this cone can get cloned onto things. So this is currently getting cloned all over the place. We don't want that many. In fact, I want a count of 1. And it probably needs to refresh, so we'll rewind. And I can see that each one of those lines probably has one. It's hard to tell, honestly. Give me a second here, because why did the tracer lines disappear? Oh, because I accidentally just changed the count of the wrong cloner. Okay. Sorry, that was my fault. Okay, this cloner with the cone, the arrow, has a count of 1. And now it's looking a little twitchy, but you'll see that each line has exactly 1 cone. If we were to say, actually, yes, each one does have 1 cone. I don't want it at the end, though. I want it at the start. We could scoot all these to the end point, and you'll actually see it pop back to the beginning. I think we can get around that if we turn off loop. Yeah, if we turn off loop, then now it's actually snapping to the end point of that spline, or in this case, the start. And we should change the cone to Z+, because Z+ is forward in Cinema Land. So T for scale, we can scale all these down. And now you can see that in spite of just letting those spheres travel along completely randomly, these cones are now locked to whatever direction those splines have. And so, yeah, with them being locked to wherever those splines are going, those will always automatically face forward for us. Now, let's see. Why does it suddenly not look like they are... Oh, interesting. Okay. So this tracer is, yeah, it's cloning onto the original. Oh yeah. Okay. That's why it was throwing me off. So I'm actually glad this happened. It was throwing me off because remember, I was surprised that the tracer didn't trace the geometry. So that should have thrown up a warning flag right away. What this is doing is this is actually tracing them pre-dynamics. It's like, okay, so those are pre-dynamics, which means it's just seeing the original clone and cloning onto that object. We can get around that by feeding this, I think, into a connect object, turning off weld, and now we can tell the tracer to actually see, actually, is that even the way we do it? Oh, no, let me get, the connect is a bad idea. But I think we can make it work properly if we move this tag from the individual spheres up to the cloner. Let's find out. No, that's interesting. What am I missing here? I feel like there's something obvious I'm missing because this is a trick I swear I've done before. I swear I've done this before. I do have some ways. I have in my head a couple workarounds here, but I thought this would be a pretty simple simulation. And I'm actually kind of surprised that it's not actually cooperating that much. Travis, no, tracing the sphere doesn't make any sense to me because there's only one sphere if that's the case. If we drag in the sphere instead of that, then only one sphere would be getting traced, and it's probably the original sphere that's not even moving. You have to calculate it after the cloner. And if we drop this entire thing into a connect, sometimes the connect doesn't get acknowledged. Like it's not going to refresh that properly. And yeah, you see here, I could say trace the vertices, but now it's going to trace every single one of them. And I don't want that either. So that gets pretty tricky. Now, can we clone? So here's where here's my possible workaround here. And this is a weird path. I didn't think we'd hit this as a limitation. What I'm going to do is select I make a plane, make it editable, select one point, invert my selection, delete everything except for, oh wait, that will, can we shift delete? Yeah, okay, hold down shift and delete, and we'll leave the single point. I'll move that single point to the position of 0. So hopefully now there's a single point inside of an empty polygon object. So if we drop that inside the cloner, I don't know if this will work, but hopefully this is still, there's a good chance it won't calculate. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Let's trace that tracer. Okay, so it's tracing. It is tracing those. Those are still simulating, and they're still being treated as spheres, so they do exist. Because if you put a null in there, it wouldn't work. You have to do something that has geometry, and technically that point still counts as geometry. I'm not sure we get this little echo there. If I reset, then it does. Now, those are tracing the object, but they need to. Oh, the connect object will probably kill them off. If I connect all these, then now you see that it's again not seeing it. I thought we could build this rig in a pretty straightforward manner, and kind of surprisingly not working. I mean, that's fine because this was going to be the more specific and controlled way, and the one I was more excited about was the field flow version of this. And I don't know, I'm kind of weirded out by whatever limitation that I'm hitting here. Yeah, Quack, the axis of the original object was still zeroed out, and I zeroed out the specific point. So yeah, it is there. The connect object erases out individual points, which is where the problem of that is coming in. It's a bunch of empty points, and that doesn't work. And yeah, so that's the trouble there. So yeah, and a bunch of people have guesses, and I appreciate that, but a lot of the guesses are pretty, or I know they won't work. Maybe some of them will, but it's not worth testing all of them. Or it's dangerous to go and test all of them. Having said all of that, why don't we undo a few times, get back to where we had the sphere, and maybe just go right into the fields version of this, because the cloner version is not working so much, and we'll see how we can get the flocking, how well we can get some flocking working. Now, we did do some flocking earlier, but we're going to simplify a bunch of things here because we don't need everything. That can still be something we travel around. These can still be dynamic spheres. We won't worry about cloning onto anything quite yet, and we'll let these continue traveling. So we're all good there. They're all in the line. They want to be in that line. So instead of them traveling naturally along here, we can get rid of our rate, so they're just in the original position all the time, and create a... we're going to have to actually turn off follow position. So they fall, so they go, wah! So we don't want that. Control D, under dynamics, no gravity. Handle cloner property. There's a handle cloner property in the tracer. Oh, nodes only. Maybe. I didn't save that version, so I've kind of moved away from it already. There might have been a solution where we changed this from nodes only to something else, but I'm not so sure about that. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, now these are all kind of intersecting each other, and they'll float away. That's fine, because what we want to do is control this via a simulate forces field force. And the field force will be the spline, that same spline. This spline is going to, let's see if we can visualize this really nicely. You all know, if you're regular viewers, that I really love seeing a two-dimensional cross-section of this. So on Z, I'll zero this out. We can get a cross-section, which I probably want to be way bigger. And you can see that we get a lovely little cross-section at any given place. So if I were to move this in kind of parallel to the line we're currently on, it's actually relatively tricky to do. Let's do that. You can see that these are all traveling, these lines are all traveling right along the line that we're currently on. Now, wherever we're visualizing this, it's not actually relevant. It's just a cross-section showing what's going on. Now, for this to be full power all the time under object, let's make sure that the spline is offset to 100. Now you can see full power along it. You see these indeed are going to want to travel that entire line. It's going to be weird, but if I hit play, they will try to travel along that line, but currently they're intersecting, so they're exploding. They're all exploding away. I'll T for scale them down a little bit. So they won't. They're still exploding away. What are they exploding away from? Is it just that there's like collision and that collides with a collide with a collide? Yeah, it is. Okay. It's just the sphere being in the way. I thought that I could ignore it, but apparently not. Hit play, and now they're not intersecting, and now you can see that they actually do start traveling along that spline, but even though the direction does change to follow the spline, they've built up all this energy and speed as they're traveling along it, so they'll just keep flying away into space. We can begin to remedy this by doing something like saying, let's not use the spline that way. Let's add a second copy of the spline. And this time, I want it to not travel along the spline, but instead be attracted to the spline. So that's just changing the distance mode from along to radius. We can set this radius to whatever we want. That's relatively large, but we can even go larger. Let's say 200. And now you're going to see actually it's pushing away. So it's backwards. We want to attract instead of push. So direction, invert direction. And now when we turn this on, we should see that these will, what are they doing? Now it's just going upward. Maybe it's that's the initial velocity. They get some speed to start out with, but why? I guess it gets weaker as they travel away. Is that what my problem is? Because we didn't add the friction in, and that's probably our missing element here, is it's completely additive. When we have the field force in this mode, it's a very additive. We're adding power to it. So if instead I just said set absolute velocity, then it's just going to be constantly giving it full power to that direction. So now it might truly be pushing away. Maybe it was not inverted and I just misinterpreted. If I turn this on, yeah, now you see that it's going to be, no, are they falling asleep? Why are they seemingly not updating? It's like it's getting a single calculation and that's not calculating again. Isn't that strange? I mean, it's a set direction. Maybe. No, but once they move to a different spot, they should change direction, and they just keep going in one. Okay, I'm just maybe off my game today. What's going on here? These aren't supposed to be combined yet, Sid. These are two different concepts I was going to combine later. But yeah, it's just based on a radius. I mean, it's a relatively large radius, but that I think makes sense. These are all just getting attracted to the line. There's no gravity. They're all dynamic. I got rid of the follow position. The next thing I was going to say is we need to drain some of their energy out from the system, which the main thing would be adding a friction. So now there's energy constantly being drained, which combines really well with the add to velocity setting. We can see those getting blown away. However, maybe it's inverted, maybe it's not. But now let's see. Yeah, see, it's just, it overshoots, and that seemed to slow down for a second there, maybe. What am I doing here? I would just completely, I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if I've run into some sort of bug. Let's give this full power so it's not fading out as it goes. It has that initial velocity. There's a lot of friction. We could really drain the friction here. It should drain it constantly. So it's in that range. It's not changing. This shouldn't, there's no fall off. Sometimes I accidentally put things in fall off, but that's not the case here. The direction, I can invert the direction, but that's still going to just constantly travel away. What the hey? Let me think. Let me think. Delete the dynamics tag. Simulation. We'll add a brand new rigid body to it. Change that to be ellipsoid. Nope, still behaving weird. Man, yeah, apologies that this one is just not cooperating so much. I kind of want to, maybe we can come back and like tackle this again at the end of today's stream, but I want to move on to something else, not get too fixated on this, and we'll start it completely from scratch and do some simple things and see if we get it working. For now, let's tinker around with something else and maybe come back to that. Tyrone has a question, which somebody else seems to have seconded. So let's see what we got here. It looks cool. The question is, any idea how to replicate this? Is there audio? No, I don't think there is. Whoa, look at that. Okay, well, first of all, this was made by Evoked Form. It is using Houdini and Cinema 4D. Let's see. Everything I'm seeing, I think we could do. Pop socket 3D. I'm not sure what that means. I'm seeing if there's any other details. C4D art, poster. It's pretty cool. It's very nice. I mean, the design is really great, and I love the glass on here. Now, let's see. What is our specific goal here? I want to keep everything simplified. So we could, in theory, do some sort of rock, and I might displace something later on. However, we'll begin with just using like a series of cubes that can intersect the pane of glass. Now, what I'm thinking is let's simplify the pane of glass, and we'll do the simple method of this, which is a really cool trick. I think other people have some tricks. I think I might even have had a trick I've talked about in the past about ways of hiding the broken glass until you actually want it to break. However, let me show you one method. It has a limitation, which is essentially that doesn't have any true thickness. But create the pane of glass via a plane and a Voronoi fracture. Create as many fractured pieces as we want. We can increase this randomly, make a bunch of them. You can also add in, there's all sorts of ways of adding in extra variation or breaking them in one spot more than the other. Not least of all is you can change your distribution type to something like exponential, and then setting it to be, let's say, y minus, or I guess it's y plus, and we could have it fade out there, and your exponential will pinch it really strongly in one corner or not. So if you want to get a little variation in there, that's kind of a neat way to do it. Let's go to the count. We make more. That will calculate pretty quickly. So with that broken apart, we could say simulate rigid body, and they'll all immediately fall. If we don't want them to fall, we can say don't calculate. Let's add dynamics. Don't calculate at all until dynamically you will be triggered by a collision. So on collision, they'll fall. So in the beginning, none of them will be moving. Now, if we want to make this look like glass slowly breaking up, what I like to do is take a flat sheet like this, throw that into a connect object, which will weld it all down. Weld is turned on. It'll weld it all down into one shape. And then that can be fed into something like a cloth surface, which will not subdivide, but it will give it some thickness. And check this out. Yeah, we'll go extra thick on that. And now you can see this is all broken apart into extra pieces. And if we were to animate something like a sphere, that is a simulation collider body. Coordinates, let's keyframe our position. I should have done that at 0. Easy enough to drag that back. And let's say, yeah, fine, at 45. This can have been moved up to this position. Keyframe that again. All right, so now that that is dynamically moving up, if we hit play, that's going to collide through and start breaking those pieces. But here's what's cool. If I feed in a material here, and we'll just stay in vanilla cinema for now. Let's say that this is just transparency. It is now glass. It's all fine default. Throwing this in on that, if I change our display mode to not showing anything, you'll see that there are not actually any cracks showing up here because they're all getting welded together via this connect. So hitting play, those will now start pushing through the pieces. And as the piece moves away, suddenly it won't be in welding range, which means that separate piece will travel in some new direction. This would, probably would have been a good idea to scoot this along Z. So I'll delete the Z keyframe and scoot this a little bit more forward. So now as I collide through, I'll push them forward a bit. Yeah, a little bit. So you can see those will float away. And if I hit render, I guess we need a little bit more to see it. So I'll throw in an HDRI. We'll just use HDRI link, plug in from Grayscale Gorilla so we can make material, throw on HDRI link. I want to control the luminance channel of it. So I'll drag that texture onto link, and now it's going to give us something to reflect. And if we want to have that go very quickly, I can say, give me preview mode. So now going through different HDRs, and you know what, I'm just going to go with my old classic favorite, European Holiday Derelict 1, because it just has lots going on. So the point here being is if I render the, whoa, what's going on there? What is going on there? Why do we get this weird infinity thing going? It's like the normals are inverted or something. It's just a pure mirror. Yeah, maybe the normals are inverted. Let's try telling this cloth surface to push back negative. Yeah, cool. There we go. So I was right. The normals were inverted, so I just pushed it with the opposite way. So now they are facing the correct direction, which means when I render it, you'll see that this glass is a nice solid pane of glass until one of the pieces actually gets hit. And then that hit piece will float away, thus making it look broken, which is pretty cool. Just because it's running relatively quickly, why don't we set this up for a very quick render? Lock that, divide it by 2. All frames, don't save. Yes, save the scene file. That will be in episode 32. Scene files. 1A, Shatter, glass. So we got a couple steps to go here, but this is just the first one. So let's render that. I didn't mean for this orb to be glass, but that's fine. So let's make this big. Zoom up for the live stream. So yeah, you can see the individual pieces start breaking as that travels up. Obviously, you could do things where there could be some sort of force pushing them differently. But it's kind of fun being able to make this is the very easiest way to make a pane of glass not look pre-shattered. And yeah, I think it looks pretty neat. So you hit play on that. I mean, the glass is very transparent at this angle, but you can see the different pieces getting pushed away. All right, so that's kind of step one for what we want to tinker with. We could also tell this to not render in the viewport, saying render tags, compositing, not seen by camera, but it'll still render in there as a reflection. And this glass doesn't have to be reflected. Anyway, that is kind of a shape we're going to eventually collide with. Entirely very nice, clean parametric hierarchy as well. So that is a bonus for us. Now, what is happening in the other thing is a bunch of rocks are coming in and kind of appearing out of nowhere and starting to fill up the overall space. So what I'm thinking is that's probably, dynamically speaking, a relatively simple setup. We'll do it just with some cubes, but I think the concept will come across really well. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. So I mean, it's funny because that goes both ways, because one of the reasons this is my favorite season so far is a lot of people asked Houdini questions and we try and make it in Cinema 4D. So that gets kind of automatically fun there. So cloning, a bunch of different ways to set this up. I'm going to clone some cubes. Let's just have them travel upward. So let's say 3 and a dimension of 1. The spacing, how big is a cube? The cube's about 40. We'll leave it about 40. That seems good. 40, 40, 40. This cube can separate them by, I don't know, some amount. Let's say 10. So those will be 10 apart, 10 apart, 10 apart. That might be too much, but we'll see. So if I do that and I make a bunch of vertical ones and a bunch of horizontal ones, hopefully there's not so many that dynamics freak out. Actually, it probably is way too many, or they're too closely spaced. I'm letting them intentionally collide with each other because here's the ultimate plan is I can say simulation rigid body, and these will have a very heavy follow position. Let's say the heaviest you can go really is 25. After that, you can start getting twitchy. And I'll give it a lesser follow rotation, but I'm also going to say 99.99 and 99.99 damping in both linear and angular motion. So pretty much what that means is if I hit play, which is a little dangerous, I'll hit save. If I hit play, yeah, the initial collision is going to be like super crazy, but after a frame or two, it should figure itself out. Well, a bunch of those are fighting each other, but you can see how they all explode out and they're going to try and move as little as possible. That's fine. We need to give them a little bit of variation for their initial condition. Simple enough. Add a random effector. Honestly, I don't think I have to go further than that. As soon as I hit play, they're going to try and separate out from each other in all directions. Again, that's completely fine. I think there is way too many. So I think we can cut this to 11 by 11 and just give ourselves extra spacing. And we'll just enlarge them more as they go. And in fact, why don't we just T for scale them up so they can get a little bit larger. So you can see that they'll bulge and try and move away from each other. So obviously out of the gate, that is not looking like something that's too interesting. Let's also give this some random rotation. So they're cubes, so 90, 90, 90 should do all the variation we need. So we need to scale these. So on the cloner being selected, create a plane effector so it's automatically applied. I want to affect the scale in a uniform absolute way down to -1. So they've all been scaled down to -1. Now I say, where are they scaled down to -1? That requires a fall off of a linear field. And the linear field, let's move it in from left to right, actually. That's applying a color. We could tell it not to if we want by turning off the color channel. So we can let these travel from one side to the other. And we can actually have it do it pretty quickly. So linear field on X. So we'll keyframe that. Hit play. We'll see not much happens. And let's say right around now, yeah, frame 65, that can have transitioned all the way over to the other side. And let's see what that gives us. I don't want to see this linear field. Hit play. And they scale up, filling up the space. Now, I think that this is really all that's happening at its core in the other animation. These are all just being affected. You can see the glass will bounce off these pieces. They're dynamic. The glass doesn't go anywhere until we see these boxes start to transition in. And now it just turns into art directing the overall system. If I scoot the entire block system behind it a little bit, then it's going to be more inclined to push the glass forward. You see, just by scooting it back that little bit, it looks so much nicer because we're getting, we can feel the glass getting pushed forward, and seeing more of the glass break is definitely a bonus on this. I do feel like we still have quite a few. It's filling up the space more than I want, so we can shrink the cubes, or we could have there be less of them. But it's running plenty fast, so we'll just make them a little smaller. Yeah, so it's not filling up so much space. And you see as they transitioned in, they are causing everything to shatter. Now, I think that the one we watched, or what we were seeing, it was transitioning a lot quicker. Right now, we're feeding through a very smooth transition. So as this goes in, you see they slowly move into this new position. But if we start pinching this linear field a lot tighter, giving a very small transition, then they're going to just kind of pop into existence. And that is going to, first of all, it's going to fling the glass more forward, and they're going to react to each other more. Now, stylistically, I'm thinking I'm draining a lot of energy out from them. And maybe we don't need to do that so much. I'm going to get rid of all of the spinning drain, so they're more free to rotate. I don't think they will rotate that much, because when they collide with each other, that's naturally going to stop them from spinning. I guess the ones that are just floating are going to have a little bit of a problem. In fact, I'm going to grab this random, and I'm going to lower this down to 555, barely any randomness, because them pushing each other out of the way and their natural rotation will give us that. In addition, we could turn on this random scale and let these all scale a little bit randomly, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, so they won't be quite so uniform. So we can just let these pop into existence. I guess now they're a little too small where they're not forcing each other out of the way, so I will scale that up a bit. Oh, okay. Misclicked and it got huge. Yeah, now they get created and they pop in, and they will start scooting those away. Actually, you can see here, remember I was saying 25 is kind of the limit of what we can do. You can already see 25 is really high. Do you see how they're twitching around? These are really fighting to get to a particular position, and that is what I was talking about. So this really strong follow position of 25 is the culprit there. If we start lowering it down, it'll start calming that down as well. So if I say 5, it should be enough to keep them essentially in that position, but now you see a lot of that vibration has gone away. So that was that's the point of that. All this linear damping, I don't even know if that's necessary. We could leave this down back to the default of 5, and now they're just free to kind of move around, and it's just the collision with each other that is what's driving most of the motion to keep it snapped in there. Now, we could use this linear field with a length of essentially 0. Let's try 0. Sometimes 0 doesn't work. It doesn't, yeah, I was going to say, if you do actually 0, something like the linear field doesn't understand 0. But if we do set this down to 0.01, it does understand it, and you'll see them suddenly just pop into existence. Here's something that's really cool is in the plane effector, in the plane effector, using the fall off, we have a linear field that's essentially saying you're going from scaled 0 all the way to scaled to whatever your default is. We could use something like the delay. Yeah, let's use the delay, and we can affect how these are how they're transitioning on. So essentially we're just saying turn on, but by using the smooth, even though it's just turning on, you'll actually see a transition. You see there's a couple frames of transition as they smoothly come in. That's smoothing them out. So we could just change the slider and maybe a little bit more quickly be able to interactively see these pop in or out. Like I like this one. Like that looks really good. They kind of are coming in out of nowhere, but there's also that little bit of a transition. So I don't know, it just feels really nice there. In addition, I'll turn that one off and add a different one, and we could do something like a spring, and the springiness should, and I'm going to unclamp it. This is very important. Currently it's clamping, which means it gets bigger, and it's going to hit 100% and get clamped, and then only spring to get a little bit smaller. If we turn that off, they can actually spring above their original scale. So you'll see these will get larger before they get smaller. Now, because there's so much motion, there's a lot of springiness here, but on the as a group, we don't really see it. If you stare at any one block, you'll actually see it scale up and down quite a bit. Let's see if we can exaggerate it and if it has any, like what kind of effect we have. And yeah, with it cranked up, you can see these will like scale up and down, up and down. And I forgot to turn off clamp, so apologies. Now you can see it overshooting and going lower. So let's go to a slightly smaller, more reasonable amount. And yeah, now you can see it popping in. So these two combined actually can usually give you some nice results. So if we smooth it beforehand, they can scale up and then have that little bit of life afterward as they do some scaling. Keep in mind, the more you smooth it, the less effect that the scale is ultimately going to have. And that, yeah, if you make something very smooth, there's not much left over for the springiness to have an effect. So if we let these transition in more, I don't think the springiness will be as strong. But I think that looks pretty nice there overall. And one of the core things that is differentiating what I've got here and what the other one was is just that it was very heavily subdivided. And given the rig that we have, I think we are pretty free to do that sort of post, like do it after everything else has happened. So if we subdivide those cubes a bunch of times, we could even say, if we're not displacing it that much, we could say, hey, cloner, I want you to calculate as a box. So these are all box calculations. It doesn't care about all these individual polygons, which means it should probably even run quicker and more accurately. And then we can run, we can use a displacer. And let's see if this works actually. I have a question about this. If I say I want to do a noise displacement, we'll just start out that way. Now, this is going to be still doing a box calculation, but you see there's a lot of slowdown. It could just be because of the displacer. But something I want to test is there's a use deformed object checkbox. If we turn that off, I want to see if that speeds it back up again. Still about the same speed. That checkbox was added for Voronoi fracture for when it's breaking an object apart into individual pieces. This is fine. One of the problems is that each of these is being displaced before it gets cloned, which means it's creating whatever, like 11 times 11 cubes and 11 times 11 displacers, and each one individually needs to get calculated. So that can definitely slow things down. Dynamically speaking, are we able to turn this onto a multi-instance? Yes, and now it's back up to speed. It does seem to behave a little oddly though. So maybe not so much. Well, like I was trying to say that we could run this and get a bunch of displacement and get different looks on the boxes if we change the way the noise looks and get something that's a little bit rockier. I mean, honestly, at a certain point, you just go and run your simulation on the boxes, on a low poly version of the boxes. Or when I say boxes, I think the original reference was a bunch of nice boulders and rocks. So that's the kind of thing that we could pre-break something. So in this case, if we were trying to, I don't like getting too close to the original reference, but just for fun, I will save this with the displacer turned off, just so we can see this a little bit faster. But if we wanted better, rockier chunks relatively quickly, something we could do is create, I guess we'll just try and generate a little bit of rubble here by creating a very similar rig, putting this into a Voronoi fracture, breaking it apart into however many parts that we want to. Bring. Let's not go too overboard. So we'll break this apart into chunks, and then we can turn on detailing, enable detailing. And that is actually going to super subdivide all of these chunks. And let's say noise on the surface as well, I think. Is that happening on the inside? It's a little smooth normals, use original edges. No, don't do that. Keep original surface. Which one? Okay, there we go. Keep original surface. That's the one I wanted. I don't know what noise surface does, but yeah, keep original surface. There we go. Now the entire thing is getting like displaced into these chunks and subdivided really nicely. You'll see that there's actually a lot of triangles being generated. However, if we, well, let's just brute force this a little bit, I suppose. If I make this editable, it's going to explode it out into all these different chunks. There's a lot of extra detail here that is not needed. Pretty much all these tags are irrelevant, and everything will run a lot quicker if I delete that. Oh, interesting. This is all just being displaced. look at the displacer comes through, and there is what's actually causing the displacement, which is pretty interesting. So why don't we put this all into a connect object? And I'm going to tell the connect, don't weld. And now everything is baked down into its final nice position there. I don't think we need any of this stuff except for maybe the Fong tag. So now that those have all been broken apart into their, well, they've been baked down into a single thing. If we say mesh, where I can never find the setting, clone, cut, move, conversion. Yeah, convert. Here, polygon groups to objects. What that should do is re-explode every individual chunk out into its own piece. And now, with any luck, we've got a bunch of rocks, essentially. So we can rename these as rocks. Each of them is a piece of this thing. But if I make a cloner and select all of those and put them in, I've now got 70 different rocks that this cloner can generate. And now we've got, as many rocks as we want. Ring. Endpoint. Now I can increase this, a little bit of random rotation, a little bit of any kind of randomizing. You see, we just get nice rock chunks now. It's pretty straightforward. There's probably a way of doing that parametrically, but at that point it's running so slowly, like I don't see what the point is. And you get all these different chunks. If we were to, let's just see if we can steal these. Why not? Copy. Go back into our other scene file and see if we can swap out our very simple rock for these. And I'm going to tell these don't calculate as a cube, but I do want you to calculate as a convex hull, which means they are not seeing the cavities. They're going to be calculated in a very clean, simple way. I do expect it to be slower, but not be too slow. So let's hit play on that. And yeah, now we get those chunks. They're a little small, so we'll scale them up. T for scale. What's interesting is all the chunks that we're feeding in are still in that original form. So that's actually kind of nice. I like that. So now they're just a little bit bigger. And now rock chunks. Bum, 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 bum. And we let that be completely random, but we could have done something so that these were a more specific type of rock. But yeah, pretty straightforward to generate that type of thing. And hopefully that at least gets to the meat of the technical side. One of these days, when I have a lot of time, I'm going to spend a lot more time trying to learn making things look pretty, so we can spend some episodes being like, let's make something look pretty. But what gets tricky there when we're looking at somebody's piece is talking about kind of the core concepts is interesting, but you don't want to recreate their entire look. So those get a little bit tricky there. We definitely have some additional questions here. Let's see. Well, Tyrone, I just tackled one from you, so I'm going to grab some from someone else. And let me see if I can see one on YouTube. Oh, man, that's a tricky one. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name entirely, but it might be Einhab Visuals. But how would you rig dynamic dreads flopping around on a head? I mean, that's a fun question. At a certain point, you just need a single model of like one what is the singular of dreads a dread? Oh yeah, Einhab like rehab, or is it just ehab? But yeah, that's cool. Let me just quickly Google this. Images, make sure it's all clean. Yeah, so essentially we've got like just dreads all over the place. So you can get essentially at certain points, just like we got they're almost like little individual braids, but then they tend to be fuzzier. So you just need a singular model of one, and then you start copying a bunch of them on to the overall shape. So let me think of what the best way, or what I might actually do here. What's a quick version of this? I'm going to make a hemisphere. And with the hemisphere, create just a simple hair object. So we'll add hair. So there's these hairs. What the main goal here is going to be, like you could make them custom. You could put these exactly where you want them to be. In fact, I can say I want my hairs to exist as guides. So now literally every one of these is one hair. Now, if nobody has done this, you should totally do this because it's really fun. There's actually a really neat thing. Well, I'll show you in a moment after we set the generate. I'm going to generate. Let me simplify. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. let's generate something. I would like to generate circle sweeps. Now, this is actually sweeping geometry now. Let's say don't show hairs, but now you can see there's actually geometry here. Now, the subdivisions, well, they're hard to see. So let's open up the hair material, and the thickness is actually driving this part. So I'm not sure what size we want these dreads to be, but let's say 11 by 11. Okay, they're gonna be pretty thick, but that's fine. Let's go with this. Now, that is determining the thickness. Then we can determine how many subdivisions there are. That's entirely dependent on what this guide said. So if I say 12, there are now 12 subdivisions. If I say 4, there are now 4 subdivisions. So let's keep that in mind. Now, if we just hit play, these are going to behave like individual hairs and flop over. The more subdivisions they have, the floppier they will be. They can bend further down. And this is not too bad as it stands. So let's go under forces, and we've got this hair-to-hair settings. And actually, I think that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to try and do some hair-to-hair collisions. I'm not sure how well this works. There is a radius, and we currently set this radius up to, I think, 11. So let's see if that works. I'm going... Excuse me. Let's see how well this works. I mean, it's working all right. I've never thought that they work super great. I mean, here's a strength, and I think they just kind of push away from each other. So yeah, there's almost like a force where there's like, no, kind of push away a bit. So yeah, not amazing, but I think it gives us a decent amount of control. I also want to get a little bit of motion, so I will make a vibrate tag. Oop, that's not vibrate tag. And I'm actually going I will use a vibrate tag. This is a good use case for signal, but let's keep this vanilla right now. Let's say 33 by 33 by 33, frequency of 0.5. So what this should do is start rotating a little bit and not too quickly, just so we can get them like shaking up a little bit. So let's just say generically that's our basic dreads movement. Now let's save this as number 2A dreads. Having done that and letting these all flop around, we could change how quickly they can bend on the base point. You can do that via... Where are those settings? I think they are are they advanced? Cache parting. Oh, it's just under dynamics. Apologies. Under dynamics, that is just the properties, and I think it's the hold roots. Right now they're being held like 80%. If we drop that down to 20, it should be able to bend. Yeah, you can see they bend a lot more quickly from the base. So you got to find your happy medium there of how quickly you want them to bend. Otherwise, you just need more subdivisions. Now, this is where I don't know if this will work, and let's see if it does. But my thought is, can we clone, because this is now geometry, can we clone hairs onto this geometry? So that's the tricky part. So with these hairs selected, can I say hair, add hair object? So now you can see that each of these dreads has a hair, and they're all getting cloned all over the place. In this case, I want lots of subdivisions, but I need a length. I need the length to be pretty short. So let's make it longer than that. And this is a little dangerous. I can hit 1 frame forward, 2 frames forward, 3 frames forward. Okay, so that seems all right. Oh, that seems to be working really well, actually. You can see that the hairs it's just working quite nicely. So now we have a basis for the hairs, and then hairs cloned onto that. So that's actually quite nice. Now, there might be a refresh issue. I should probably definitely make the second one happen after the first. So let's just call this hair geo. So with that in mind, why don't we make these tubes way thinner? So the hair material itself needs a thickness of, let's say, I don't know, 3 by 3. So it's going to look thinner, but dynamically they're still pushing apart from each other a lot. And I think all of those hairs will update and jump to that geometry. I think they're all connected. Now, we would have to play with the actual hair material here. So probably a lot of, I'm not sure what a good combination here is, but like a lot of clumping, a lot of frizz. So like tons of frizz, let's say frizz 111%. So tons of frizz on that. Clumping will kind of counter that. Kink is kind of like frizz, but for the entire hair. But really, I just want to like maximize a ton of frizziness in here. You'd also get a bunch of curl in there. I don't have a good combination in my head. If we render this, it's probably going to generate a lot of hair. So yeah, you can see them all start to intertangle quite a bit. Some of it just turns into we need the proper frizziness, and this is definitely not an area of expertise for me, but I feel like there's less shine. Like if there's darker hair, then we're just not getting that much individual shine from any one hair. But there's also a chance that, well, so we'll pull back on this specular, and if we render that, hopefully we start getting something that's a little bit more calmed down. Yeah, immediately that starts looking better there. We can darken this up from the default a bit if we're inclined. And yeah, so that's actually filling the space pretty well. If we tell the original hairs not to render, and we have these be full enough of enough hairs, then I think you'll just get this really nice kind of clumped up frizz. And you could layer up multiple things. You could also keep the original hair there and render it and just put a dark color or a color that will match the original hairs on there. Keep in mind the thickness that we're applying here, that is a variable we can tinker with. So this could get thinner on the tip, although this isn't going to make much of a difference because most of the frizziness is coming after fact, but they could be tapering a bit as they get near the end, thicker at the bottom. And if this is all working, which I don't know that it is, these hairs I think shouldn't be dynamic anymore. So these, I would say no dynamics. They're just going to travel along with whatever they're on, but all this frizziness and everything will hopefully be maintained. I don't know how good that this will look, but let's pop open some render settings and just see if it gives us anything even slightly reasonable. What I'm impressed with is how everything is parametric still. So let's give that a go. I mean, it'd probably help if we get a light in here, but it's already going to take a bit of render time. Let's see if we make 2 lights with shadow. Let's make one a little bit warmer, one of them a little darker and blue. So let's just see if that gives us anything. Yeah, actually there's a little bit of definition there. I mean, I'm sort of inclined to lighten it up just so we can see them. Although if we put in a sky and then they'll be on a background we can actually contrast against. Yeah, there we go. They still look a little bit dark, maybe depending on the lighting angle, but maybe we want to bring some of that specular back. The other thing I'd say is we'd want to maybe make, yeah, we gotta go easy with the specular. Something that would probably improve the overall effect as well would be more thinner hairs, because right now there's a decent density there, but I want everything to run relatively quickly for a stream. So let's just run this and see if we get anything even semi-reasonable, because this might like explode horribly. I wonder how consistent they will be. But I gotta say, I'm impressed, even as far as we've gotten, that we can clone hairs onto hairs and maybe get it's looking pretty good. Like they don't seem to be twitching. Like I'm watching individual hairs and they seem to be maintaining their shape, but who knows? Yeah, as soon as these fall, they look pretty nice. It's not perfect. I should make more of them. They should be thinner. It's possible we could get some color variation in them, but you could always make more than one hair object. Like one could have one type, another could have another. Right now, maybe it's a little too frizzy, or we need the kinks to work better, or we need more smaller ones because they're very fuzzy on the ends, and maybe you want that. But if you don't, you want more definition, then I think more smaller hairs would fill in the volume as well. Now, this does have the vibrate tag, so it will just constantly move. Let's see if it looks any good. All right, that actually looks shockingly good for what I thought we'd get out of it. Like the hairs are perfectly consistent. The dynamics are working pretty well. There's a lot we could do as far as like combing and styling this and making sure we can make the overall hair stiffer so they wouldn't be so inclined to fall. But yeah, they are being consistent. They're being stiff. We could add additional settings to fix almost every attribute of it, but I'm impressed at what it's able to do right now, just because it's running so relatively quickly. Let's just Tyrone, I think we did do hair on hair here. Like we turned on forces hair to hair. We didn't do surface to hair, so they might be passing through that as a collider, which I should probably do. Simulation, hair, collider, so now they won't collide with the head, or the scalp at least. But just for fun, why don't we try making there be more hairs? So let's make 3 times as many hairs, but make them a third the length. Maybe not quite a third. I'll say 8. So they're a lot smaller, but there's 3 times as many. And let's see if they can fill up the volume really well. And I mean, it's all looking pretty good. So if we just render, now we might start getting a little bit too much separation from one to the next. No, that's pretty good. So you see, by adding 3 times as many hairs and making them be less frizzy, do you see how there's more definition to them as a group? So I think that actually goes a pretty long way. Keep in mind that there's so much power we can go into the color, and we could add variation to all of them. So like a 5% variation in the color, and we could do a 5% variation in the value. You gotta be careful because this hue variation can go off the rails quickly, but that seems all right. Changing the specular, like how sharp the specular is going to be a major variable. I'm not going to over stress out about lighting this and setting up. The basic idea is working surprisingly well. So, and then the last thing I was going to say is we don't talk about this too often, but if I'm going to turn off the second hair, and now we're just looking at the original hair geometry. And we'll save this as another version. If you've never tinkered around with this in the hairs, it's pretty cool. These hairs are where they are, but if we get rid of them, what's the best way to do this? If I say simulate hair, where do we get this? Hair mode tip selection. We do a live selection. Well, let's just try and do that. I'm going to select all, hit delete. I've deleted all the hairs. So then under hair mode, we can now say tools, probably add guides. So now we can add guides, which means if this is the head of a character or a mountaintop, because right now we're painting geometry, as I paint, I can just put these anywhere I want. And keep in mind, when it comes to this hair geometry, I said, don't render individual hairs, render exactly what we're seeing. So this is what is actually there. So you have the ability to paint hairs, and thus, if these are currently dynamic, but you can imagine we could be painting trees right now. We could be painting flowers. So you have like, oh, here's a hair object, but that's clover. Here's a hair object, but this one's going to be dandelions. Here's just grass strands, and you could paint individual different plants if you wanted to, but it also works with hairs. In this case, we could say a count of 0, a radius of, a count of 1, a radius of 1. And now I can literally put individual hairs exactly where I want them to be. So, you could give somebody a bald spot and place these just exactly where you want them. So yeah, we could just do something like that. We should be able to just reactivate these. There's a chance. Yeah, it didn't quite refresh, but that's easy enough to fix. I think if we just say, possibly just update that guides. Let's say regrow. Yeah, if I click regrow in the actual hair, then it will regrow on just those. And now hitting play, now those are doing their thing. And if we render, 3 times as many, but there you go. That just works as well. So you get all these. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of what, if you wanted, like, the way hair actually works is all the stuff is getting clumped together from the area around it. I'm not sure if any of look at the reference images, and none of them show it too well, but all the hair has to come from somewhere. So pulling these in I don't really have it in my head, but you could clone a series of splines onto those and clone hairs onto them. But I think it's working pretty well. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that as a overall concept. I'll leave that saved as number 2. And let's see. That seems good. Everybody seems to like it. Yep, it seems like I covered the question. Don is asking, could the hair be unrooted and simulate a bowl of spaghetti? Yes, to a degree. The hair on hair simulation is not the best. So if I was going to do a bowl of spaghetti, let's see if I can not make this up and actually do a real quick version, because whenever I say that, we go too far. But let's just see if I could very quickly generate a bowl of spaghetti. In fact, hair might still be a good way of doing this, but not using the hair's dynamics themselves. So as a test, let's just create a plane. On this plane will be generated hairs. We don't need to see the plane. It won't do anything. This bowl will be a simulation collider body, and make sure that it is set to a static mesh. So it's going to be hollow. It can go inside. And these hairs, the reason I'm doing this is it's a really easy way of generating a whole bunch of splines. Each of them have currently 8 segments, let's say 12, and they're a length of 100. So hairs, I'm going to say as guides under dynamics, there are none. Generate spline. This is actually generating a single spline object. If I make this editable, you'll see it's a single spline. So now we've done that. If I add a simulation soft body, then these should all be individual little soft bodies. Maybe. I don't know. Let's hit play. And okay, they're sneaking through the bowl, but you can see how, and yeah, that's just these are a lot of soft bodies all calculating, and they are sneaking through the bowl. That's not super surprising. Potentially, I'm going to rewind, hit A if it doesn't refresh properly. Let's add in some more subdivisions there, see if that catches it any better. Not so much. So yeah, those are escaping through the bowl, but you can see that they are individual, they are dynamic. There's a lot of settings we tinker with. This is not something to spend a lot of time on. We turn on a margin. I'm not sure what the margin should be, but that will actually give them some volume. We said 11, it's 100 long, so that might mean 5 is the magic number. Let's see if they explode. They're not exploding. So now these should all have some radius to them. And there we go. Now I didn't change the bowl. I changed the spaghetti. Now each one of these is 5 thick. It's a radius of 5 thick. And now you can see they actually have some volume to them. If we drop the margin down to 1, maybe they have a little bit of, they're still escaping a bit, but you'll see that they actually won't intersect each other. And you could get a big bowl of spaghetti this way. Then the main setting in your dynamics tag for this is flexion. So if I get rid of all flexion or drop it down to like 1%, then these can bend a lot, and you'll see them all able to bend a lot and filling up the form. And that would be how I do it. And it's still all parametric, so you can run a different simulation type on the hair. It's just a good way of simulating a bunch of splines. Just for the scene file I save. And by the way, if you're on Patreon, you get access to all these scene files as I save them. I will make this a little bit thicker just because it was not escaping through the bowl when there's a little bit more space on them. Yeah, they're up at 3. It's mostly holding. And yeah, they'll all start colliding. And as a last thing, well, these are generating, do we get the access to the spline controls? We might not actually, because we are generating a spline, but it doesn't give us spline controls, because there are ways that we could change the spline type so they'd be smooth after the fact, but it's not giving us that ability. Well, it's still parametric. We might have to make it editable if that were the case. But let's save this as number 3. Hair spaghetti. Doesn't that sound appealing? And then the Brits named Alex linked to YouTube and Twitch, saying that might be a good tutorial for spaghetti. I'm just checking if there's any other questions along the lines of the hair thing. So Ehab is talking about the elephant rig we did. Now I'm suddenly picturing the elephant with dreadlocks. Sideshow Bob would be proud. Yeah, excellent. Could you give dreads to a Medusa dynamic, or like a Medusa snake idea? I'm assuming you don't mean, or could you give the dreads a Medusa? Okay, so could the dreads have a Medusa snake-like animation? That's an interesting question. I don't think that's the way I would go about doing it if that were the case. Though you saw how the hair was very flexible. It was giving us a lot of, it was just working very well overall. So if I were to want to generate like a snake that's supposed to have some sort of behavior where they're alive in some way, then I'd probably build a series of, I'd model something. We don't have a snake model. Let's, should we do this, or should we do a different question? I mean, I kind of like it as a question, but it would be, how involved is the question. Let's see if we can, let's see how much we can do in a relatively short time. So let's make our snake. It is not going to be a great snake. I'm going to tell you that now. So let's do that, do that, do that. We'll give it a little bit of curl in there, although we'll get that naturally from it. So let's just say that's the overall snake shape. It's a little big for this head. T for scale. There we go. That's going to be a snake for us. I will put it at 0, approximately 0. All right, so that becomes the basis. Now, let's sweep it. What am I looking for? I'm looking for a sweep, which will get fed a end side, T for scale. And we get something like that. I want this to be nice and evenly subdivided, so this will become a uniform subdivision. I want 4 subdivisions, and actually that's not too bad. Let's give it 2 more. I'm not even going to look at a snake reference. Make this editable. Actually, before I make it editable, caps, no caps, make it editable. And now we can make a little bit of a snake head, maybe. UL. Man, just making up a snake from scratch. Probably not the best idea. Let's see, D for extrude. Yeah, snake's head maybe tapers down a little bit and then goes out. I can also just hold down control and drag out additional segments. So that's sort of that. And then I probably split it at a certain point. I maybe would have given it another subdivision, but I didn't. So let's say knife tool, cut, 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 delete. And now to the loop selection again, control pull out. I'm not sure if that's a good idea, but T for scale, points. I don't, they changed it so that this jumps between different selection modes. I really wish it just went back to the regular selection tool. I wonder if there's a way to change that default. They changed that in R22, and they thought they were being helpful, but it made things way worse in my opinion. This is the situation where you definitely want to start looking at some sort of reference, but we're trying to do this relatively quickly. And then, you know, you need some eye holes and whatnot. Maybe it can be a cute cartoony snake. I'd probably subdivide that once. Is that the way I would do it? Let's see, USMG, maybe, because I lost the quads, but you can still work around that. I'll just do that. Anything pop out? Googly eyes? I don't know. We'll do that. That's fine. It's not the best snake, but it's a snake. The eyes are supposed. I don't know. I know it's a terrible snake. Okay, so I should have not deleted the original spline. That's fine. I don't think we did too many steps. I'm going to make sure I copy the snake. I even pasted it to make sure that I had it copied, and I can undo. Okay, it's back. Paste. Now we can pull out the spline, and now we've got a spline here. It's still got the same setup, subdivisions. So the reason for doing that is I do want it to extend to the rest of the head a bit. So I'll do a cut there, pull this forward, and that can be that. All right, so this spline, I can convert the spline into a character convert spline to joints, and now you can see I get spline, 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 spline. It's backwards, so let's select our spline, right click. I'm in point mode, right click and say point order reverse. Now I can right click and say, no, not right click, character convert spline to joints. Now you see joint, joint, joint from every place that there was a subdivision. Honestly, I might want to subdivide it by 1. So I can hit US and subdivide it 1 extra time. So now I can say simulate, I'm sorry, character, convert, spline to joints. Now I got twice as many joints. That's all I wanted to do there. All right, nice. So with that done, I'll temporarily turn off that spline. Don't need those. So here is our joint chain. So I could say, yeah, this will all just be in that. So right click on, this is a good time to save it. Dreads. I think this goes to a new number. This will be 4A snake dreads. Right click, rigging, IK. This will be an IK spline. I want it to be a 3D IK spline. The joint chain ends at the end of the joint chain. The goal is not a goal that can do whatever it wants. And then go to dynamic. I want to enable dynamics under advanced. I don't want continuous update. So if I play, it should kind of, okay, it's just going to flop way down. So forces, we want these to be alive. So I'm going to say gravity 0 so they can just kind of stay. And instantly, look at that motion we got right away. It flopped back up again, but that was actually pretty good. So now that's a little bit alive. So let's go and rig. I'm going to bind that to the snake mesh. So select the joints and the mesh. Character, bind. So that should be bound, which now means if I go over here, well, it's not, we'll trick it by turning on gravity for a moment. So I'm going to put gravity on, hit play. It's going to go, oh no, that didn't work at all. Did it only apply to, maybe it only binds to the currently selected geometry? That's not something I was aware of, but that might be a thing. We don't need any of these tags either. Let's select all, I guess. Select everything. And now say character bind. Does that work? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now you can see the snake just flops over. But if I put this, let me wait until it resets. Put that to 0, you'll see how he kind of comes alive. And it's pretty adorable. So now we get that. So if that becomes a null, we put this into that null. And now we bring the head back. And I clone this rig onto the object. So we'll get this. Currently it's on the surface. I'm going to say polygon center. And then transform. We need 90 degrees on some axis. I don't know which one. Okay, negative 90 on P. There we go. Now all those rotate out. So now they're in all these random directions. That is too many. So let's tick this down until we get one less. Refresh, please. Refresh. Okay, so now there's slightly less. I'm trying to think if, we want them all maybe pointed upward a little bit. I'm trying to think of the best way to get a good orientation here. You'd want to, I'm just cloning. We probably wouldn't want the clone. You'd probably want to do an orientation, but we could say don't align the clone. And now they'll all be aiming straight up like that. So maybe that works. And I'll say they should get a little bit of randomness. Or we can maybe do a target. Let's see if this works. Target. And now they are targeting. If I move this to the proper position, yeah, something like that, then they'll all spread out a little bit. And then after that happens, can we say reverse heading? No, they do spin. There's settings that we might be able to do something more, but I'm just going to grab the cloner, add a plane effector. Don't push out, but yes, rotate, spin like that. There we go. Make all the heads spin out negative 90. And there we go. Now we kind of get this little radial thing going. So there's nothing that we can do except make this editable. And man, this would be a good time to be able to show off the plugin, but we can't. Making this cloner editable. Oh, they... okay, there. I had to go forward one and the back one, and now they seem to have reset. So now if I hit play, we now have all these snakes, but there's no gravity, so they're not going to do anything naturally. But if we bring back that vibrate tag, animation, vibrate, and give it that same, let's say 33, 33, 33.5. We'll even turn on position, 0.5, 222, 222, 222. Hopefully that's not too much. Hit play. Oh, no. Oh, they need to be a child of it. There we go. 1 frame forward, 1 frame back. Force a reset. There we go. There we go. Look at that. Snake hair. Hiss, 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 hiss. More frames, obviously. And then, like we have complete, it's a series of individual joints here. Which one? Okay, that's this one in the front. So he's going to be our master snake. But under dynamics, you have all the control that you would want. Like we add a lot more drag. So he's going to stay behind. So you see there's a like a lag that it has behind everything, which could be really nice. You could change the rest hold, which means, well, I guess that's how much he's trying to snap back to position. So if we leave it a little bit looser, then he's going to be less inclined to quickly get back where he was. I think overall strength does a similar thing. You see if the strength is really high, it's not moving very much at all. If we lower it way down, he's going to be very at the whims of what's going on around it. So there's a lot of control you have to manipulate that. And then on top of that, why don't we temporarily stop the vibrate tag, reset the PSR, where's it, F and G? Yeah, 1 frame forward, 1 frame back, that'll force a reset, and create a field. Simulation forces, field force. And under field force, add a random. Okay, so there's a random in the field force. These are going to get forces. Currently, they're set to include. I'm going to search for the word, and this is going to not be amazing, but search for the word joint, and all of these will appear. Now I can, yeah, they're not even collapsing, so I'll just have to select that. I think I can just scroll and select all those tags. Yeah, that did work. But now I can say exclude, and now it's going to use all the different forces. This is just an old system that defaults to being off. So now there is a field force with a random. So if I hit play, they're all randomly getting moved around. Increase the scale and give it an animation speed. And you see there's a lot of strength to it right now, but we can lower that. Let's say 1. Maybe 0.5. I'm surprised at how much strength that has. But now you can see that there's a noise that is driving all of these. And the more we change the scale, if I make it bigger, they're going to start behaving more uniformly. And if we make it smaller, they're going to behave more individually. So you can see we're getting a little bit of life between them. I know the next question is probably going to be, could you make it dynamic so they don't collide with each other? Not easily with joints. This was just a good go-to here. And I don't know, there could be additional ways. Like maybe there is a way of doing this with hair. Like maybe you could clone a bunch of hairs and then bend them over. Maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, we can add that field on there like that. And now the head can move around while they're individually moving around as well. Depending on the stiffness, everything could change. So yeah, it's just kind of a fun, weird thing. And now we got a big snake pile. The ultimate would be building a dynamic chain, like using connectors, and they would then be able to collide with each other. It might even simulate relatively well, and you could do a lot with forces, and you could build almost not personality, but you could build forces into them individually, where there could be like a motor that's making it do something. That's beyond the scope of what we could do in a live stream, but that's the type of thing that's on my agenda, on my list for tutorials to do. Or not that specifically, but Bralius, yes, you could. Actually, you don't even have to spline. You wouldn't have to spline wrap them onto hairs. There's a built-in function on hairs. Let's save this. Snake dreads. Do some snake jazz. Could you do it onto hairs was the question. So if we go back to this, how well this is going to work. It's going to look really weird. They'll be offset, but let's do the generic quick version. So if I were to delete everything except for the original snake, so there's a little. There's that snake. If we make these hairs, we say generate. We're saying, well, so you see individual dreads. Those are all there. That's fine. Ooh, I accidentally deleted the head. That's not good. Don't delete the head. And then reset Mr. Slippy. And he's not dynamic anymore. Okay. So under hair geometry, it's generating. Don't generate hairs. But yes, I do want to generate something. In this case, I want to generate an instance. An instance of what? Well, there's now an instance dropdown. So if I drag our snake into that instance, it is now actually creating a copy. It's going to be hard to see, but there's now actually a copy of the snake getting copied onto every single one of these hairs. Now, these hairs are obviously way too small to see anything, but if I change the thickness, if I change this hair thickness to be bigger, then you can start seeing a hint of a snake. And if I make it 55, 55, then now you can see that the snake starts to appear because these individual hairs are now that size. Some problems right away. You see that is automatically generated from its center point. So even though the snake geometry is pivoting right from the center of the neck, it centers it here. But this is getting cloned onto that, and I think it is fully dynamic still, so that does work. And it'll just kind of flop around. Let's get rid of, or let's make, let's change the hair geometries. Let's change the hair geometry forces to be positive gravity. So it's actually pulling up instead of down. So they should tend to want to kind of stay alive and up. And now we already had dynamics here with a hair to hair. Where was that? Forces hair to hair is already pushing. But these are really big. We already saw they're like 55, and I'm worried about making it too strong. But actually, that's doing an okay job of keeping them apart from each other. These dynamics are not like dynamics. It's more like a force that pushes them away from each other. But that's doing an okay job of doing it. Now, keep in mind, these are just straight lines, so that little bent head on the snake isn't actually being accounted for at all. But it does work. And having done that, this hair object is still looking at this one, and I think it's just generating that geometry. So I'm curious, if we turn it on, if we get hairy snakes. Let's turn this on and say hair, guides, regrow. And now all the dark curly hairs should be getting cloned onto the snake. So if we render, now there's fuzzy snakes. That delightfully carried through. I guess we can make the hair green now. And there we go. Now we got furry snakes. Is that what you wanted? I know that's what you wanted. So now we got furry snakes going. It's still got the render settings, I think. So we'll save this as another ridiculous scene file that never should have been made. And let them do their thing. How did we end up here? This is one of those times we have to re-examine our lives. Oh my God, snakes on a plane. I should have made that joke, but instead it's snakes on a hemisphere. Yeah, put it on the elephant. At certain points, I mean, right now it's running reasonably well, but it'd be really easy to get to the point where this is going to like be calculating really badly. It does seem a little bit like there might be a frame of lag even in the render. Maybe not. It's hard to tell. I'm trying to are they traveling through or not? Like I'm looking specifically right there, and are we seeing more or less of the snake as some frames go by and not? No, it seems consistent. So there's just not enough hairs to completely cover the snake, but obviously that's not surprising. But yeah, even just think of this for a very basic making a plant. You can make one branch and then clone onto it. And you could probably clone, make them hair. The problem is that they're going to generate everywhere. They're going to generate directly on all the different layers. You couldn't just draw them on individually. So it's going to be kind of on every polygon or on every point. But it's pretty weird. It's pretty weird indeed. Working surprisingly well, though. And surprisingly quick. Even, let's see. Yeah, even in the viewport, look, all these guides and hairs are still running in double real time in the viewport. So not too bad. I would love to put on the elephant, but I think that it's just going to make too many clones because there'd be one for every polygon on it. And a snake, elephant, green dreads seems like a step too far. Let's see. It's a good idea, though. I mean, I like the idea. Somebody has to make the elephant with dreads. So watch last week's episode, this week's episode, and make dreads on a dancing elephant. Let's see. There's 2 questions that just popped in. I'm going to read both and see what jumps in. Well, a bunch more questions coming in. Travis, how would you create the effect of burning wood in the scorched wood surface? Like the actual transition from chipped wood to scorched wood. That sounds near impossible, but let's see what we got. Okay, so it's real footage. It's all cool and stylized too. Let me zero that out. Oh, slow down. It's stop motion. Well, keep in mind this doesn't look This looks like a crossfade. Like, is it actually burning? Yeah, this is just a crossfade right now. Do you see how it's just transitioning magically from one to the other? So this is wood ring stop motion, but here they did not stop motion the transition. Um, the only thing that's immediately jumping to mind, and man, it would be a hog for calculations. But it would be using the volume stuff, and then you'd have to use a volume-based wood shader to do it. Let me see what I can do here. Let me think. If we make a cube, kind of set this up for like a little 2x4 type of thing. Make it editable. That's a surface. So set a selection tag. I wonder if we could actually, we were having so much luck with hair. I'm actually kind of inclined to, let's see if we can use hair here. Maybe it's a fine way to start, even if we don't stick with hair. But hair, I mean, in a lot of ways, hairs is like a cloner. Polygon area, and growth should be a direction. The direction will be Y. So hairs is almost like a cloner for splines, where it just generates its own straight splines. But now we can clone as many of these as we want onto the surface. They don't need any segments, so we could just say, give me 200. So now you got 200 hairs. That's not enough. Let's say 300. So 300 hairs. Inside of the hair object, we don't need this to be as long. Let's say 20. There we go. So we got 20. And now inside the hair material, we can set the scale and or length. They're the same thing. Putting in... let's see. I need to see these properly. So let's say the hairs generate as guides, and I want to generate a spline. Don't show the hairs. And if it's deselected, then now we can actually see the end result. So under scale, we could do a bunch of variation in scale. It doesn't, you don't really get a remap. So you can just see that there's a little bit of random variation. Does it work if we feed it a noise? Doesn't seem to in the viewport, which is a shame. Maybe it will a 2D noise. 2D? No, too bad. Now, let's try not doing scale variation. Actually, I got to be careful because this doesn't seem to be refreshing. So let's see. Let's do a variation of 0, frame forward, frame back. And actually, maybe it is. It's really hard to tell. I don't think it is. Yeah, that's a 2D noise that's not working. So clear, that's all off. Wait, was it not on? Give me a moment. I just need to confirm. Frame forward, frame back. Oh, it is. It does work. I just hit frame forward, frame back, and it forced a refresh, and then it suddenly popped in. So now this is actually pretty good, because now we can feed this in a noise and make that noise anything that we want. But more importantly, let's see if this works. Feed this into a filter, and if this works, we can enable a gradient. Like gradation curves, but essentially we now have the equivalent of a curves editor in Photoshop. And if I can change, yeah, it does work. So I can change the remapping of this, and you can see I'm actually successfully remapping the length of these. So I can make it so that I can get very few tall ones and lots of really small ones. And that was essentially the goal. All right. I just want to see if we could generate this kind of reasonable geometry. The volume builder inside of a volume mesher. Save this before we go too far. (5A) burning. Oh, I butchered that. Burning. All right. In goes the cube. Blurp. In goes the hair. Blurp. All right. Builder, what you got for me? I want this to be interpreted as a spline. The radius will be quite small. Set this voxel down to 1 right out of the gate. This radius can now be 1. density will be 1. And now we can get these kind of shapes a little bit. You can see our geometry is going to be quite subdivided. Now, the hairs, we have the ability to say 777, make more than double the amount. That's really giving us a nice variation on the height there. And yeah, that's not terrible. They probably have to be a little bit in from the surface, but that's not too bad. Now, if we set the volume measure down to, say, 0.5, it's going to be half that amount, and maybe the density needs to be doubled. Oh, interesting. Density has to be twice if we do that. Potentially, we could say that these should taper down a little bit as they get skinnier per segment, please. So we could say, oh, that does look better. We'll do something like that, and now they get skinnier as they go. Honestly, I want even more, though, so let's say 2,000. Nice. Yeah, look at that really nice structure we're getting up there. It's pretty cool. So yeah, those are getting tapered, and they're all random, and we can spread them out however we want. Inside the volume builder, we could create a smooth that will obliterate everything. And let's see which ones might work a little bit. Like median, like that can, yeah, that's going to give us some nice pointy bits if we just pull that up a little. And that's not bad as far as just that nice kind of random sharp geometry up there. Now, as I said, this cube that's generating the top, what I really should do, well, I guess it's simple enough. That's just where the hair, so that'll just be cube for hair. Make a copy of that, and this one we'll just make a little bit bigger. T for scale, not on Y. And honestly, just because we don't need all those extra voxels getting calculated, let's really skinny this thing up. And that will go inside. Blurp. And yeah, now it's big enough that I can actually capture all of those different parts, and you get that nice splintered overall look there. We have options. We could push it further. We could run smoothing. In fact, why don't we try running a smoothing after effect? I usually do like the end result. So yeah, we can do that, and you can see it's going to get really sharp and peak, like really create some peaks for us there. This smoothing, yeah, that's not in the right spot. So we'll smooth that. Let's turn that off and actually even see what it looks like without that. I kind of like it more without, and it'll calculate a lot quicker. So yeah, we can get something like this. Now, as far as the burning is concerned, one of my immediate thoughts actually is using a smoothing. So if we look at this, let's say that ends up being the end result. Let's look at the reference. I'm frame forwarding, and yeah, so we end up with that. I'm not even sure that this is the same wood, because look, it gets taller. So this is actually a terrible reference as far as like what does wood actually look like when it gets burnt, but let's just go with it. Shane, yes, you could. There's several ways of doing what we wanted, but I kind of like the idea of trying it with hairs here. We could have used different types of noise and letting them fall off, but this gives us that verticalness, which is what I really wanted. But depending on what the final burnt shape here is, I wonder to what degree we actually have a lot of freedom just to let it do this. We could just slowly keyframe up this smoothing strength, and you'll just see how it's kind of like all those little bits are getting kind of burnt away. And that could be pretty cool. Like it's a really nice effect. And in the, if you went back a few versions of cinema, I'd be like, I have no idea how you made that. But you see how that's actually working quite nicely overall. And it just gets less and less detailed as we blur it. And we could even iterate this again. That's even smoother. It still works where you can pull back on it, but now that'll get smoother, smoother, smoother until it finally fades away into something that's quite smooth. Now we could deform, we could do different things to deform different parts of it away. We could blob something else in. We could subtract parts of the shape by adding in some other shape it's intersecting with. There are a lot of options. Let's just stop here as far as this fading away, and we will create some keyframes. So let's say it is supposed to be burning, so it can be stable for 10 frames, keyframe the strength, fast forward, well, let's play, and let's just go all the way to the end, and I guess just go to the point where it's bobbed away. So that's going to be eased in and eased out, but let's see what we end up with. There's kind of a pop there. Maybe we need it to be a little bit smooth in the beginning. And you know what I'm going to do? This smoothing, we're currently in Gaussian 2. I'm going to actually delete that. And instead of doing it inside this hierarchy, we don't get access to the keyframes then. I will create a a smooth, and that'll become a child. And you see it actually does the same thing. And I can filter that. Oh, and I forgot. If you make it a separate thing, you can feed in fields. That's intriguing, because now if we add a field in, that's pretty good, actually, because look at that. Now we could do this. So it could actually burn from one side to the other with whatever kind of transition we want. And that is super cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yep. So separate out your smooth, I don't even know what you call them, your smooth effect. Yeah, there's no list. It doesn't call it anything, but yeah, the smooth effect can get a field. So that will now get itself keyframed at frame 13. That's fine. Transition that along here. Nice and melty. And man, yeah, that's really good. So let's actually, because it's going well, I know it, we could do this in a third-party renderer, and in some ways, well, see, I just don't know. Like I know Redshift well enough, but I don't know it well enough to be confident to do it in front of an audience where it's like I'm going to be messing a lot of things up, and I haven't done it in a while, but it would render way quicker. But well, it does have Cinema 4D noises, but they're a lot harder to combine. Not really, well, a little bit. And you can range map. I'm trying to think if I know how to do it. Well, we'd have to do all sorts of fall offs and whatnot, and that worries me. So I don't know. I'm going to stick with vanilla cinema for now. It's the kind of thing that if this, I don't know, especially because of the way the smoothing just worked, this makes me want to maybe make a full tutorial out of this idea, but we'll just have to see. So I want to spend just a second talking about building a noise-based material for this. And what's really cool is if we build this with Cinema 4D 3D noises, first of all, we have the new high quality noise checkbox. So if we turn that on, and yeah, I think that's all we should really have to do. This should calculate way better noises for us. However, it didn't look like it changed anything when I just turned it on. What am I missing? I turn on high quality noises. SSAO, why not? Yeah, I don't feel like we're seeing that terribly well. Yeah, that doesn't seem correct. If I hit render, yeah, if I hit render, it's not. What's the dealio? Why is it not mapping? Maybe it's spherical mapped. No, it's UV. Let's do cubic. Is that going to be realistic then? Nope, still doesn't match. That's supposed to be a thing. Maybe it's something that maybe it's too complex of an object. Just for fun, to show you, if I drop this material on here, we see that. But no, it's still not working. What am I doing wrong? I thought this was a thing. If I turn on high quality noises, I thought it gave us pretty dang accurate noises. I can't think of what I would be possibly doing wrong there. It just doesn't seem to be doing it. Well, that would, it's not the biggest deal, but it would have been pretty helpful. Well, I'll try frame forward. Yeah, so yeah, frame forward, frame back. I'm hitting it, but it's not. I could have. Maybe it needs to be editable. No, that doesn't seem to be the case either. UV, wall editable. Yeah, it's not changing. Maybe actually this is a silly thing, but maybe it's because I put it into a layer shader. Wait, why is it not rendering? Wait, okay, maybe it's because it was in the layer shader. Give me a moment. Render. Yeah, okay. No, I think it's because I put in a layer shader. Let's see if that actually holds true, and we can work around it if that's the case. So yeah, okay, I'm out of the layer shader, and now it seems to be working. So that was the case. It didn't like the layer shader. So now that we're out of the layer shader, we can pick any material that we want. And what's going to give us some nice fire? Epoxy is pretty good. Or no, I'm not working on fire yet. I'm working on just the wood. So Naki, I'm always a big fan of Naki. So now what's cool about this is when you turn on, I'll show you. If I turn off high quality noises, we get this kind of like, it's giving you an idea of what we're going to get, but it's not the final. But if we turn on high quality noises, look at what we get. You see this? And I hit render, and it's pretty much identical. So the idea of getting that kind of feedback is just wonderful. Now, honestly, when it comes to this kind of thing, we might want something even simpler, like maybe a wavy turbulence. And the idea here is you build out your wood grain as a volume. So this is a very vertical piece of wood. So what you do is you stretch it very vertically, and you start getting these stripes very vertically. And when that gets fed into, we can keep this very simple, feeding that into a colorizer. Actually, this is a good thing to like just search for whatever kind of wood. We want something light to contrast with birch wood, something light to contrast with what will eventually be burnt. So I'm just going to search for images here, and I just want even that's fine. Or I don't even need to zoom in on it, because now we can just say let me pull this loose so you can see it as we go, and color pick. And then what I'm going to try and do is find the darkest possible spot on it, and I usually exaggerate it a little bit more. And then let's go and grab a midpoint, find something that's kind of mid-toned, and exaggerate maybe a little more saturation, and grab a lighter one, and grab the lightest point I can find, and maybe exaggerate the lightness of that just a little bit. And now I get something that's pretty reasonable along those lines. And so we can pull that up, and that's that's going to give us that in general. Typically, I like layering these up more. Let's see if this actually works. If I feed this colorizer into a fusion instead of a layer mask, I think it actually likes it more. And so if we put a noise in, let's try seeing if it works. If I say overlay, then yeah, I think it is actually still continuing to work pretty well. So by doing an overlay, we could feed this through a different noise. Let's say Luca's may be dangerous, but I do like Luca. So if we make Luca and make it super tall, and now it's overlaying the other one, and maybe it's a little small, so maybe, not too much. Make it a little smaller. We could even find a different seed if we wanted to. And now it is overlaying, but let's just go easy on it. Let's say, so there's the base color. Let's just give it a little bit of extra variation from that. And I don't know, I like doing that kind of thing. There's a lot of layering. Now this actually ends up being nowhere near as much contrast as I wanted, so I'm going to beef it up a little bit. We'll let it go darker and lighter just to get some more contrast. Maybe this can be smaller. Like as I shrink the global scale of this, you'll start seeing this grain being able to travel up and down the overall shape. But here's the key and why this is actually important. It would not be a good idea in the circumstance that we're doing to attempt to just project like a realistic material that we have. We'd want to build it like this because we need a volume of material. I'm just not I'm pulling this middle one out, and I actually like that better. It's not amazing, but it's better. And maybe that can go larger. Yeah, that's not horrible. It's not amazing, but it's not horrible. And potentially we could drag the whole thing into a bump as well and allow that to have a bit of a bump. Let's see, is that actually doing a bump? It's hard to tell. 1,000. No, it's not. It's not doing bump in the viewport. Maybe there's a setting for that. No, it just doesn't like bump in the viewport. All right, well, good to know. But because this is a 3D volume of noise, this passes through the noise. So when I hit play from our keyframes, why is it that? When did that suddenly like go hip and scoot over a little bit? I must have moved something. That's at 0. That's at 0. Hair is at 0. The volume itself is not, so go figure. Frame forward. Yeah, there we go, fixes it. Okay, anyway, I'm going to hide the linear field, but now as it passes through, the hope is, I should probably turn it on, shouldn't I? The hope is that we will see it passing through the noise. So it's like real wood. There's a wood grain that exists in every single little layer and slice and molecule, and you can do cross sections and see what they look like on those individual little grains as they travel upward. So that's the goal and the reason to enable this to do something like that, where it can actually transition. Why does it take so long to start doing anything? I know we gave it a few frames, but that seems like too many. So yeah, so that enables us to do a transition through. Now, how would I go about? I gotta tell you, I'm not even thinking about the fire. Like I'm not I don't care about the fire. I'm just thinking about the wood and building that rig out. And trying to think of how would I go about doing the end result. I mean, I could just make a completely secondary material that's unrelated, but then the transition between those can get difficult. You can't do a vertex map while it's live like this, so then we'd have to do, our probable best bet is probably a proximal in this type of scenario, because then we can just transition one to the other, and you can actually do quite a bit with proximals. Let's see. I think it'd all be in one material. So let me think of the way I want to go about doing this, because we need just like the charred version of it. Let's look at the reference again. Yeah, I mean, there's a very specific look when it comes to the end result there. Like these peaks and everything look really cool. So it's kind of, it's going from almost pure black to like this very light gray up on the vertical peaks, which is doable. Maybe not in the viewport, but it's doable. So we now have a fusion. Here's the thought. If I copy this fusion, we can say everything in this bottom layer is the wood. And now just set this to normal and say everything in this top layer is the burnt wood. Now, if I paste it in there as well, I now have two copies of the wood. With the wood, now I'm going inside this wood, and this is how it's being created. Now, one of the major elements is that fall off, the color. So let's see if we can make that work. And that's pretty straightforward, because that is simply a fall off shader. And the fall off shader should, and yeah, but that's not, we're not going to see in the viewport, which is just something we have to deal with. But if we take a pretty light gray, pull that up here, and it will pull the black pretty far up above the 50% mark. That means everything that's vertical should be black. And then as we start transitioning to flatter curves, then we should transition into gray. Now, this is currently overriding everything because of the layering of the fusion. Actually, apparently it's not normal. Yeah, that one's there. Oh, this is set to overlay. So let's say normal, full power. Oh, maybe it does show all right in the viewport. So we're going to end up with essentially that. And actually, that's not that bad. But I'm thinking that maybe we're smoothing too much. Maybe we want to remove a lot, but we want to keep some peaks, because clearly you can see in the burnt that there's a lot going on there. So in the linear field under remapping, we can say minimum and say there's still 25% of it. Actually, that's maybe, we want the opposite, max. Okay, so we can pull back on the max. So if I say that there is still 75% of it, you can see we still end up with, or no, is that, no. Is max changing that? No, it seems like all right. That still seems to be erasing everything out. Is it not clamped? Or is the strength? Okay, I just pull back on the strength. That seems to bring everything back, but it still seems to be additive. Like it's still applying even more of it even as it moves away. So is there some sort of clip to shape? No. That's interesting. That's not behaving the way other ones do. That's not the biggest deal. I know how to work around it, because we can just say add a smooth, and the smooth can add, and this is a value of 1. Let's say it'll multiply, Yeah, so I'll bring this back and I say I want there to always be 20% left. So this will now erase out everything. And at the end, it's still multiplying 22%. So this can all burn away. But we'll still be left with something that's a little bit spiky. So that's, if that's the burn, then we can pull this and you can see how however I layer this out is going to be the orientation of it. Now I don't know how well that will render or how accurate it is going to render. It's okay in the viewport here, but it's not fully the story. But I think a big transition is probably kind of important there. It's being a little tricky. I feel like you want a pretty full transition, but the more I pull it back, the more we're losing the edge ones. It's a little sensitive, but I don't want to overthink it, because that can be that, and this could potentially still multiply. I guess it's sort of the opposite. It's like we screen on it, and that is that, but we also need to multiply part of it, so maybe it layers twice. This gets fed into, I copy that shader, and then I go and add another fusion inside that fusion. That is there. And then we also grab a copy of our fall off. Inside of here, we paste the fall off. And now I will pull that down and make a color white, because this one will multiply on top of that. So that is now going to darken everything. Oh, that's really good, actually. So this will now darken everything. So I can pull this down. So that darkens it. And then we end up with this result. And then you go up a layer, and now this will lighten what's already been darkened. And that actually gives us a pretty nice looking burn. It's not like perfect, but it's pretty good. Now every layer of this could get changed and modified and multiplied. We can go deeper and deeper and deeper. So hitting save on there, this could get a fusion inside of that fusion. You have no idea how crazy I've gone on some materials in the past, but this fusion could get a multiply or a potentially overlay. Let's try an overlay. This can overlay. So now we're just looking at the noise of the white part on the top. Give this a lot of verticality again and give it some pretty heavy contrast. And maybe shrink the scale. Yeah, this needs something messy. So let's grab a FBM. It's kind of infinitely messy. FBM actually, it's really good for certain things, but maybe not here. Ooh, Poxo, that's a good one. A larger Poxo. It tends to be pretty dark, so we'll brighten that up. Yeah, that gives you this nice burn look. Don't go too far. And I feel like that would do a good job combined with the black part as well. So let's copy that noise and go over here, and under the black one getting multiplied, we'll feed that into a fusion, and that will get the same one pasted, and this can again overlay. And that's going to give us that transition here. And the more of a transition, actually this one, we can, I like this dark transition. And we can't push this too far because it's all about curvature, which might not be the most realistic one. Although I like, I kind of like that burn like that. But like those transitional points are like really helpful. So if this wood was tilted a little bit, it could go a long way. But this is not a great circumstance for this, but it's something I really love doing is changing this mode to, I don't know how you pronounce this, but I just say lever. Maybe it's lev R, and it just literally makes it black and white, depending on how it combined the two. So you end up with a very, very strong transition. As an alternative, although it doesn't work as nicely, you could do an overlay, and then that entire layer in this fusion can be fed into a posterizer. Where does that live? Effect. Effect, posterizer. Where does that live? 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 Eff I thought maybe it was, oh yeah, there it is, posterizer. So you can do it in a posterizer, and you can say that this is down to 2 levels. But what's nice about doing it in this method is we are now saying it's black and white. And you do get that really harsh transition, but then you can give it a little bit of a transition between the two. This becomes like the transition. If you push it too far, it actually blurs it even more. But it's dependent on how strong this overlay is getting applied. So you end up having to do a, like, you can't, overlay is a very specific mathematical thing. So I would really want a long transition and then really overlay this. So the way I usually get around it is to overlay several times, to say like copy shader, go back inside of it and paste it in again. So now that's the overlay, and now it's getting overlaid by that same shader again. And you can see as I do that, there's more of a transition between the two. And yeah, as I pull this, it's going to give us the transition between a very harsh state and a smoother one. And that kind of thing can be nice depending on how far you start pushing it. I'm going to undo a few times because I think it looked a little bit better just in the viewport on the slightly earlier version. Yeah, that's looking pretty good here as far as a burn look is concerned. Now, now that we've got that, the last step is masking it. Now, I wish that there was a more interactive way of doing this, and it's pretty old school. Proximals were like one of the most powerful things we had back in the day. In this case, what I'm going to do is say, I want to use a mask. And now currently this is just, it's like we're seeing one layer or we're seeing the other one. So inside the mask, I want a proximal. So how do we do this? First of all, it's an effect. No, it's not. It's a, where is it? It must be an effect. Proximal, good old proximal. So the proximal will not accurately show up in the viewport. I highly doubt it. So typically, actually, the way I would do this is a little bit of Xpresso because it's such a pain in the butt to use. So creating a circle spline, I would lay this flat and then move it into position. So let's say like right about there. So like, let's say the burning is going to begin from over here. And T for scale will shrink that down. Okay. So I'm going to say I want this proximal to be wherever the circle is. So that's now taking the axis of the circle, and that becomes the start point. And then it has a start distance and an end distance. But if we say that the circle's radius, right click, animation, or I'm sorry, Xpresso, set driver, and then I'm going to save it, and then go to end distance and say right click, Xpresso, set driven absolute, then this is now set to 35 units, and the circle is set to 35 units. Even though it says percent, it's actually units. So yeah, don't ever trust that. But now this circle is actually representing both the center point and the radius of it. So while we've lost control of it in the viewport, if I render, you see there's a little bit of a transition there. Now there's also the very important thing of the inner distance. So we could also right click on that, say Xpresso set driven absolute, and inside of that set a second value. But perhaps even better though is to make a second circle, and this one will be the circle inner. And now I can say radius animation or Xpresso set driver, and then go to the inner, the start distance, and say Xpresso set driven absolute. So now there's a separate circle to drive that. So that's the inner fall off. So we've got one circle, this outer one, but two controls for the inner and outer, which actually give us a decent amount of visual feedback, where it's pretty much everything inside that should be 100%, everything over there should be 0, and that's the transition between the two. Let's see if that works. Hit save, hit render, and there we go. Nice and burnt to there, and there's the transition over here. And we can now animate this without being in the material. So that's definitely something I like driving externally. So we have a couple things we could do there. I mean, yeah, why don't we just, we'll scoot this over here and start it that way. So grabbing both of those, keyframe them, and well, let's just hit play and visually see what ends up happening, because the smoothing seems reluctant to do much until it gets to a certain point, which I'm not entirely sure why it takes so long to get to that. Maybe it's the way it's getting added. I don't know. It's fine. But right, nothing's really burnt now, and maybe right now we should start darkening it. So we'll grab both circles, record their radius there, and then start increasing this and let this travel. So that's burnt. It's not playing great because we're doing a really complicated volume. I mean, I guess it goes pretty much to the end. And then when it gets to the end, it's going to have stopped. So yeah, at the end, we'll have this inner radius, or the outer one. It's going to have traveled all the way out to there. The inner one is going to have traveled all the way to there, which should mean 100%. The reason I'm being very careful about the way that the radius is increased is because that they will, transition is important. So let's keyframe both those at the end. And they're both, these are also going to slowly ramp in. But now that that's happened, we've kind of seen as much as we could in the viewport. Let's see what this looks like rendered. Virtually the same. So I'll put this on I'll make a sky just so we can contrast it to the background. And let's just see what this burning effect looks like. So save, render settings, all frames, don't save, standard renderer. So we'll let this chug through. I mean, it's going to be quick. Because, I mean, it's just standard render. We're not having any shadows turned on or anything. So yeah, not much happening. I mean, maybe the darkness the burning should come in earlier, because that's actually what's going to be affecting everything. We could easily offset that to be a little bit early. Yeah, I think that makes sense. We should definitely make that. We should definitely make that happen earlier. I'm just gonna make the call. So those, I'll just select. And here's what's great. Imagine going into the Proximal and grabbing those keyframes and moving them around. It'd be a pain in the butt. Now I can just grab these keyframes and be like, I want you to happen 15 frames earlier, and done. Those have now been changed. Doing the Xpresso set drive, set driven is so important. So hopefully these can start darkening up quicker. And yeah, so those are starting to get burnt. And as they get burnt, maybe we need a little bit more of a transition. But yeah, they're getting burnt and then they'll start shrinking. Maybe we want the transition to be a little bit larger. We could just keyframe the ring slightly differently. It'd probably be a good idea if everything was keyframed linear as well, because now we have overlapping ease in and ease outs, and that's a dangerous thing. It's not very controllable. But all of this is transitioning through a volume of noise. We get the nice burn. It's actually, I gotta say, it's pretty good. It's not amazing, but considering we just built this in a live stream, that is not bad. And then it settles in. I guess it's easing out at the end as well. So that's, once again, the ease in, ease out's not good if you don't specifically want it. Let's see what that looks like in real time. Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Here's, let's make a change because it's rendering relatively quickly. First of all, let's do what I was just saying. Let's make everything linear. So select all the keyframes linear, please. Grab the linear transition, select those. That will also be linear. That's doing a full transition all the way through. These, I want to have there be more contrast. I want them to have more time to transition, so I'll shrink that one more. Control D, change the key interpolation. Keyframe linear, please. So now that will start that way. And then at the end, as it's completed, then I want that inner one to have traveled further. So there's more of a transition time between them, like that. All right, so that should be a fine, that should be in addition to the transition. The, wait, let's look at it again. So yeah, that's transitioning. And then it's too far ahead. I want it kind of happening at the same time. I don't know realistically what's the better one. This one's not doing anything. But I moved it too far up. So we'll scoot those back. I wonder if we could make these taller as well, like just to get more contrast. So the hairs, I'll set them to a length of 30. So we'll just let these be like taller. And then when they get smooth, they'll still probably get super obliterated down to almost nothing. So might as well have more contrast in them. Why not? And burning wise, why don't we move this circle up into the air so that the circle's a little bit more near their peaks, because the tips would start burning before anything else would. That's not much of a difference, but a little bit of one. And then I feel like there's something else I was going to do, and now I can't remember what it is. Some bump would be good. I mean, this is maybe a little bit too contrasty for the wood. Making the wood block taller would be good. That'll go quicker. Or Or yeah, it would look better if there's more of a block of wood travel down. I have actually made a lot of those types of materials, like wood, procedural wood materials. Just the way that's transitioning already looks better to me. No, it's not bad. Oh, I remember what I was going to do. We can let that finish. But inside of the material, we are masking, but the mask is a very smooth transition. So this actually goes to another. We can actually use this proximal and say, you know what, proximal, you are in a fusion, and in your fusion, you will also have some sort of noise overlay. So let's see if I still have it. Paste. Yeah, I'll copy that one. Go up a layer, paste that in. So this burn can also get a texture transition, although I'll make it relatively large, heavy contrast, but very large. And so that will get overlaid. So now you can see that the transition will just be a little bit harsher. Now this actually might be a case where it's nice to put that into the posterizer. So dropping that down to 2 and giving it a little bit. And now you can see really clearly the difference there, where you get just 2 colors and it's a like very harsh, or if I increase this, you're gonna get more of a transition between the 2. So it actually blurs between them, which is pretty cool. So it's something a little bit more like that is kind of what I'm going for. Also, this proximal could, right now it's a linear, but we could say smooth, which tends to just be a nice smoother transition. So we'll try that. See if it does anything for us. Render. You could even, I guess it might, if you have it too fast, it could rewind on it, but you could even animate that, because this is a burn, so it could be like changing as it goes. Although I don't think we'd see it that harshly, but that'd be kind of cool. Now, I don't have a, like I said, I don't really have a process for, it looks like smoothing might have shrunk the radius a bit. It's still, the burn's going to come in, but it's behind now. I guess the overlay is probably shrinking it now that I think about it. It will burn, but it's going to take a while before the inner part gets in there. The entire transition is probably getting blasted out. I'm hoping. Where do you go? Maybe posterize doesn't work in this type of circumstance. Yeah, that's just not, that seems to have broken it. That's fine. In here, it's in the posterize. I think that's what broke it, which is too bad. So we'll just, we'll go inside, copy the layer, go up a layer, paste it to override and not be seeing that transition. And it can just be on the simple overlay, which is something. And hopefully we can see it now. I don't have, like I said, I don't have a plan for the fire. There's several different ways we could go about doing it. I don't think I'm going to. That could, because the best ways would probably be doing some sort of simulation, like with Explosia or with X particles, or what's the other, or turbulence. Like there's a lot of different things we could do with fire. Why does it? I've done something and it seems to have broken. Don't stop, but. Is my are these rings still animating? I feel like I broke something. Yeah, they're still growing. Oh, I did something bad. Okay, here is one problem with the way I showed you. I showed you that tip of, oh, I want to bring, let me undo. I brought the posterizer back because I realized what happened. What happened is when I copied the layer and I moved it to a different one, I broke the Xpresso. So this Xpresso didn't know, you see it's undefined. So this needs, that needs the shader dragged back in again. So I have to go into that one and just grab the image and drag it on and say, that's what you're driving. I broke that so it wasn't animating up. Man, I haven't done that in so long. I'm surprised I remembered the problem. So yeah, I mean, the idea of putting some fire in there is really cool. I just don't have any specific methodology for doing it right now. In any way, that would be like particularly cool. Like generating particles off the surface would be really neat. That'd be definitely a way to go. But just in general, a fire, because you even see in the reference, I do think that this is in the reference. This is this is the real fire burning the wood. They're just doing a transition from it. So this would burn for a while for the entire thing, and it probably would not just burn one from one side to the other. The entire thing would slowly burn, but we could start on one side and let it transition to the other. There we go. Now it's back again. And now you get the relatively harsh transition there. So yeah, the burn is traveling pretty well. But yeah, hopefully there's a bunch of concepts in there that you see how I might approach it and how it's applicable. I'm trying to think. I mean, potentially there's ways we could have just done smoothing effects on it or something, so that we could have had this been edible and driven this entire thing with a vertex map instead of doing it with all these noises. But I don't know. I kind of like this. So let's see. Yeah, I'm going to stop this here. I like a lot of it, but this transition's happening too quick. Maybe I shouldn't have had the posterize be quite so strong. I like a smoother transition between them. I love the way these look at the end. So I think the burn should come early and then they can shrink down, because that looks pretty neat as they travel. But just the way that they're smoothly shrinking down and the way they're burning aren't quite syncing up, but independently they look good. Like the burn looks good and this transition looks good. They just need to be timed with each other a little bit better. And because they're both linear, like they probably should start and then at the same time now. So it's probably coming in quickly and then slowly fading out. But yeah, I think there's a lot of neat stuff there. And we did it just so it calculated quicker. But this, obviously this hair or this box here, it's super easy to just grab that and pull it down. And it's going to just generate more wood. But the more you do that, the more it is generating more and more voxels. So every refresh will take longer as you do that, because we are subdivided quite a bit. I mean, it's not super large, but this is down to a voxel size of 0.05, which is crazy small. I will save that one. I think we're already almost a half hour over. I do, like I said, the reason I'm not doing live streams is I have so much to do. So it'd be a bad idea to go too far over. Okay, everybody, for anybody who missed the very beginning, there will not be a live stream next week or the week after for Rocket Lasso Live, because I have a couple big projects to work on, one of which is launching Rocket Lasso's very first plugin. I'm very excited for that. I've been working on it for a while. It's driving me nuts. I didn't even get to use it in this one, even though it's pretty much ready to go. We're still making a couple little tweaks, and it's been in beta for a month and a half now. I'm really excited for it, and I'll be able to show that off. So that's going to be launching in about 2 weeks from today. So keep an eye out for it. Go and sign up for the Rocket Lasso newsletter. And literally, you haven't missed anything. I've never sent one out, but go to rocketlasso.com, scroll to the bottom. You can sign up for the newsletter and get an email about the new plugin. I'm really excited about it. I'm kind of counting on it being a good tool that everybody likes. It's a workflow tool. I'm not going to say any more than that for now. So it's a smaller plugin that we're kind of sneaking in while we're working on more tools, but I had the idea for it. It seemed cool and it seemed like an easy win. So I hope everybody likes it. It's our entire goal and our entire structure as a business is we're going to make tools and people buy them, and that's how we make money. So hopefully everyone likes it and they can support me by getting a tool that's useful for them as well. That is the plan. Everybody, you can go hang out on the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. Head over to rocketlassoslack.com or rocketlasso.slack.com. Both of those work. And you can sign up and hang out with all the cool people that have been asking questions. They help answer questions. It's just really useful all around. I'll see you there. There's bonus live streams if you're supporting on Patreon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sometimes there'll be a little slowdown right now, but that's how I generate my tutorials, is recording that kind of stuff. So those should be ongoing. And it's my goal to record a proper tutorial every 2 weeks. And yeah, that should be it for this. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the great questions. Thank you so much for the support, especially everybody who's already been supporting on Patreon. It makes it a lot easier to do these streams. I'm going to have to invest in a new monitor soon because the color on these monitors is terrible. So that's going to be one of the goals. But keep an eye out for the big plugin announcement. There'll be probably several live streams. So everybody come and hang out there, ask questions. And yeah, I'm really excited to see a Rocket Lasso plugin in the hands of everybody. So I will see you in those in the plugin announcement live streams. So that'll do it for now. This pretty much concludes Rocket Lasso Season 2. We will be back for Season 3 probably sometime in January. But I'll be around. I'm not disappearing. I'll be on the Slack channel. I'll be releasing tutorials. Make sure you follow me at all the things so you can see when new tutorials come out and the plugin. But other than that, thank you so much, everybody. I will see you in the next plugin live stream. So thank you so much, and see you next time.